Welcome to this session, Next Steps for AI Welfare, with Jeff Sebo. The possibility of AI systems with morally significant interests is no longer an issue only for sci-fi, but a pressing concern that requires action from AI companies, governments, and other actors. In his talk, Jeff is going to be making the case for taking AI welfare seriously, given the very realistic possibility that some AI systems will soon be conscious and/or robustly agentic. He will then explore the next steps for AI welfare, including how to assess AI systems for consciousness and robust agency, how to treat AI systems that might have these capacities, and how to navigate the tensions that might emerge between AI safety and AI welfare. Jeff is an associate professor of environmental studies, affiliated professor of bioethics, medical ethics, philosophy, and law, director of the Center for Environmental and Animal Protection, director of the Center of Mind, Ethics, and Policy, and co-director of the Wild Animal Welfare Program at NYU. I don't think I've reeled off so many titles so quickly before. He's also the author of The Moral Circle and Saving Animals, Saving Ourselves. He is also an advisory board member at the Jeremy Coller Center for Animal Sentience, an advisory board member at the Insect Welfare Research Society, an advisor at Elios AI, and an affiliate at the Institute for Law and AI. So as a reminder, before I hand the stage over to Jeff, if folks post their questions on Swapcard, we'll be reading those out at the end. We won't be taking audience questions with a microphone, so you've got to use the app. And if you upvote the questions that you really want to hear about, then I'll ask those first. We probably won't get time to ask all of the questions during this session, but Jeff does have office hours directly after this talk in Empire Ballroom West, which is just left and left when you walk out of this room. Amazing. So please join me in welcoming Jeff Sebo to the stage.
All right. Thank you, Jasmine, and thank you, everybody, for being here, to the organizers as well. As Jasmine said, I would love to spend a little bit of time with you today talking about next steps for AI welfare. And in particular, I would love to at least briefly address three issues. First, what is AI welfare, and why should we take it seriously? Second, where have we been over the past year? And third, where should we go over the next year and beyond? We have a lot we can and I think should do in research and outreach and field building, but it will take proactive work. And so I think now is a good time to take stock and think about what that proactive work should involve. So first, what is AI welfare and why should we take it seriously? Well, broadly speaking, AI welfare refers to the idea that AI systems could one day have their own, perhaps very different versions of consciousness, sentience, agency, moral significance, that they could have feelings, emotions, desires, preferences, and could deserve moral consideration for their own sakes on that basis. Now, why should we take this admittedly kind of strange idea seriously? Because the questions surrounding AI welfare are important and difficult. The questions are important because we are rapidly scaling up increasingly many, increasingly advanced AI systems, and it can be both easy and harmful to make mistakes about whether they morally matter. It can, of course, be easy to over-attribute consciousness, sentience, agency, moral status to non-humans. That can be especially easy when they look and act like us, when we use them as companions, as is already happening, of course, with current generation chatbots. And that can, of course, be harmful because it can lead us to develop inappropriate social and emotional bonds with these entities, to misallocate scarce resources toward them, even to harm ourselves or others because of them. But of course, it can also be easy to under-attribute consciousness, sentience, agency, moral significance to non-humans, especially when they look and act different from us, and when we use them as commodities, as of course we do with many non-human animals, particularly aquatic animals or invertebrates. And that can, of course, be harmful because it leads to exploitation and extermination of vulnerable populations against their will. So we can, of course, debate which of these risks is worse in a particular situation, but the present point is both are bad at least sometimes, and that means there is no easy, obvious, straightforward, universal way to err on the side of caution under risk and uncertainty. And we will be in a situation of risk and uncertainty for the foreseeable future, because these issues are also quite difficult. They force us to address foundational questions in philosophy and science and technology. Questions about the basis of moral status. Does it require consciousness, sentience, agency, relationality? Questions about the nature of consciousness, sentience, agency, the relevant kinds of relationality. Questions about the future of AI and when we might plausibly have AI systems with the relevant cognitive features, behavioral profiles. We have been wrong about all of these questions before, and we will be wrong about all of these questions again, and yet we are marching forward with the development and deployment of AI. This is a fraught situation. It calls for caution and humility and attention, not neglect or ignorance, and that is the case for taking AI welfare seriously. So in fall 2024, the NYU Center for Mind, Ethics, and Policy, which I direct, worked with Elios AI Research, which Rob Long directs, to release a report called Taking AI Welfare Seriously, which laid out those main points, along with a few more. First of all, that this is not merely an issue for the far future. This is at least potentially an issue for the near future. We could, for all we know now, within the next decade or so, have AI systems with many of the computational functions that we associate with consciousness, sentience, agency in humans and other animals. Now, that is not a guarantee that we will, in fact, have AI systems with those computational functions within a decade or so, nor is it a guarantee that if we did, they would in fact have feelings and emotions and desires and preferences. But we are not able to rule out those possibilities at present. And if we are not able to rule out those possibilities at present, we need to pay attention to this issue now in the spirit of caution and humility so we can be prepared if and when the time comes, rather than being caught flat-footed. So in our report, we made 3 recommendations about low-cost steps that AI companies and other actors can take right now to start taking AI welfare seriously. They can first acknowledge that AI welfare is a credible, legitimate issue. They can second start assessing AI systems for welfare-relevant features, adapting methods already being used in animal welfare science. And they can, third, prepare policies and procedures for treating AI systems with an appropriate level of moral concern, given the evidence, thoughtfully balancing and mitigating the risks involved with over-attribution and under-attribution of moral significance. Now, in the time since we released that report, a lot has happened in this space. In fact, on the day that we released our report, Anthropic, to their credit, confirmed to the media that they hired one of the authors of this report, Kyle Fish, as their first full-time model welfare researcher. They then, in 2025, officially launched their model welfare program. They included a model welfare evaluation in the Claude 4 system card. They even implemented a policy of allowing Claude to exit abusive conversations, partly on model welfare grounds. Other AI companies are not going quite that far yet, but some steps are being taken. For example, in late 2024, a couple of Google researchers worked with academics to release a study about evidence of sentience in large language models. Those same Google researchers are now getting ready to publish a book about the conceptual foundations of AI welfare. OpenAI, meanwhile, shared information in their ChatGPT system card about how ChatGPT should answer user questions about AI consciousness, and they also published a blog post stating an intention to study user perceptions of AI consciousness so they can understand how their users are experiencing their models. The media and the general public are also starting to pay attention to this issue, in part because of increased attention in academia and at companies, but also in part as a response to the reality that many users are now experiencing chatbots and other AI systems as conscious, sentient, agentic, morally significant, and some users are feeling distress as a result. So a lot of conversation is happening now. This is part of the broader conversation on AI governance. And that is a remarkable difference from where we were about 12 months ago. But it still constitutes only a very small first step on what ultimately needs to be a very long journey towards properly understanding this issue and integrating it with other issues. And we need to go on that journey fast, because the technology is at least potentially going to continue developing fast. So that raises the question, where should we go from here? What should we do now? Well, as a starting point, we can say we need to be acting on a variety of fronts, not only research, but also outreach and field building, institution, infrastructure building. I would love to discuss some of those broader possibilities, but right now, for the sake of simplicity, specificity, I will focus on some research priorities for AI welfare. We have already now been developing methods for assessing the status of AI systems. That requires both philosophical and scientific, technical work involving what does it take to matter and what kinds of beings can have what it takes. Can sufficiently sophisticated digital minds have their own versions of feelings, emotions, desires, preferences, meaningful relationships? We need to keep working on that and improve those types of assessments. But in the meantime, we also need to go beyond that preliminary question and ask the further questions that would then follow if AI systems did have a realistic possibility of being morally significant and deserving moral consideration. For example, how much do they matter if they matter at all? What do they want and need if they want and need anything at all? What do we owe them morally, legally, politically? What welfare protections or rights do they deserve, if any, at all? And how can we square what might be profound responsibilities that we have to what could be a very large and diverse population of digital minds with our profound epistemic and practical and motivational limitations, the limits on what we can know, the limits on what we can do, the limits on how much we care? How can we build legal and political institutions where imperfect human actors can be incentivized to faithfully represent the interests of these non-human populations, when we can barely get it together to do that for ourselves, to say nothing of other animals? That is going to require serious, rigorous, systematic, multidisciplinary, problem-oriented research in the humanities, the social sciences, the natural sciences, law, policy. So we should be undertaking that research, that field building now on all of those fronts. And then as we do that, we also have to be considering connections with other issues that we should continue to consider as we further develop and deploy AI systems. For example, the stakes for humans and other animals. We should do that partly for theoretical reasons, because we can stand to learn something from each other. People in AI welfare research can, of course, learn from people investigating health and welfare issues for humans and other animals. And eventually, the reverse could be true as well. But we should do that for practical reasons as well, because in practice, these issues are going to interact. It is already difficult to create safe and beneficial AI for humans and other animals. It is already difficult to create safe and beneficial AI for the AI systems themselves, if and when they matter. It will be all the more difficult to create safe and beneficial AI for all relevant stakeholders, including humans and other animals and AI systems, if and when the time comes where we have a responsibility to do that. And so we need research that explores those connections so we can search for co-beneficial, positive sum outcomes for all stakeholders. And as I emphasize in a paper with Robert Long and Tony Sims, there are some potential minefields here. Much of what we currently do in AI safety involves interactions with AI systems that, at least on the face of it, would raise moral questions if we interacted with humans and other animals in those same ways. Boxing could be seen as a kind of constraint. Limiting situational awareness could be seen as a kind of deception. Interpretability could be seen as a kind of surveillance. Alignment could be seen as a kind of mind-washing, mind control. Various training methods could be seen as causing suffering. Threatening to unplug could be seen as threatening to murder. Making these decisions unilaterally could be seen as disenfranchising AI systems, despite their status as stakeholders and potential participants in these decisions. Now, that is not to say that these tensions will definitely exist, because first of all, a lot depends on those questions I mentioned a moment ago. If their welfare interests are different enough from ours, they might not care about constraint and deception and surveillance, et cetera, et cetera. And even if they do, we might well be able to find a way forward that can be co-beneficial for everybody. Maybe a solution roughly like the good parenting model, where we align them to be broadly pro-social and then give them liberties within those parameters and then create an incentive structure so we can all get along. Maybe that will work. Maybe it will not work, and then we have further questions that we need to ask. But the present point is not that this is the solution. The present point is this is a problem that we need to try to solve. And the best way to solve it is by building a robust field of AI safety and AI welfare research and allowing these fields to, yes, exist separately, but also interact. So what I would love to see is investing in AI welfare in the humanities, the social sciences, the natural sciences, making it a real field that can stand on its own, and then building those bridges with people who are working on relevantly similar questions facing humans, facing other animals, so that we can then collectively try to wrap our minds around this issue together. That is where I will stop for the sake of time, but thank you for listening and looking forward to your questions.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that rousing talk, Jeff. I want to double click on something you opened with. So it seems like humans have made mistakes in the past in thinking about beings outside of our intuitive moral circle. What do you think the default trajectory is for AI welfare at the moment? Are you feeling optimistic, pessimistic?
Yeah. Well, the way civilization is developing, I think we have grounds for optimism and grounds for pessimism. Obviously, we have made a lot of progress for humans, and in some respects, for other animals, we have better average conditions for humans than we have had before. We have more concern for animal welfare than we've had before. At the same time, there is more factory farming and industrial animal agriculture than there's ever been before. There is more taking over non-human animal habitats than there's ever been before. So if we look to our interactions with animals as a guide, there are good developments and there are bad developments. They exist alongside each other. And I think the lesson we can learn is, yeah, we have different types of conflicting features as a species, different types of conflicting tendencies as a species. We have the capacity for good. We have the capacity for bad at one and the same time. That means it will not be easy, but it also means we do, to some extent, still face an open future, and we at least have the possibility of nudging things in a better direction if we think real long and hard about how to do that and then put as much time and energy as possible behind it.
Are you enthused at how engaged labs have been so far?
I am very happy and grateful that particularly Anthropic has shown leadership on this issue by, again, hiring a model welfare researcher, launching a model welfare program, doing model welfare evals, even doing low-cost model welfare interventions. I am also encouraged that other AI companies are at least taking tiny, tiny steps in the direction of at least considering aspects of this issue. But it is moving very fast, and they are not responding fast enough. Governments are doing even less. And even to the extent that we have made progress so far, there is a risk that that will stop happening soon enough. Again, if we look to animal welfare as an analogy, we saw at the end of the last century a lot of progress with advocates working with companies to find reforms to how animals are raised and killed that was good for profit and welfare at the same time. But then as soon as they ran out of that low-hanging fruit, the companies stopped being interested in working with the advocates, and the advocates had to resort to different types of tactics like pressure campaigns. And so I think we can look ahead and anticipate a point where we might reach the end of the road on advocate-company interactions, and there might have to be a broader apparatus to push for broader types of incentive changes for the companies.
A really popular question, and quite a good one, I think, is how might we know, or at least have evidence that AIs are conscious? I'm sure you've had this one before.
So very, very briefly, for the sake of time, in animal welfare science, we have what is called a marker or indicator method. We have to use this kind of method because we do not yet have a secure theory of consciousness or sentience. And so we have to make progress in a way that is open to the insights that come from different theories of consciousness and sentience. And the way that we do that is by, first of all, looking inward and finding behavioral and anatomical and other features in our own species that correspond with feelings and emotions, and then looking for broadly similar behavioral and anatomical/architectural and other features in non-humans of various kinds. So with animals, we can ask questions like, in addition to having brains and bodies like ours, do they nurse their own wounds? Do they respond to analgesics and antidepressants in the same ways that we do? Do they make thoughtful behavioral trade-offs between the avoidance of noxious stimuli and the pursuit of other goals? With AI systems, we might not be able to ask exactly those questions, in part because they have a very different origin story than us and other animals, and in part because we know that they were specifically designed to mimic our behavior. But we can look underneath their potentially misleading behaviors for architectural and computational features that would indicate the presence of consciousness according to a range of leading scientific theories of consciousness. Do they have their own version of the relevant kind of perception, attention, learning, memory, self-awareness, social awareness, language, reason, a global workspace that integrates it all together? None of that is proof of consciousness. Proof is unavailable without a secure theory, but to the extent those features are present and integrated, it counts as evidence and it nudges the probability up, and that is better than nothing.
Can you imagine there being a point at which we feel like we have some proof, some computational properties that we can point towards that convince 80% of people, I don't know, that AIs are conscious?
Yeah, those are, in a way, two different questions. One is, can we find proof? And that will not be possible until we have a big breakthrough, a paradigm shift in the science and philosophy of consciousness, and we do have a secure theory of consciousness, and then we can be much more confident about the evidence. I am not confident that we will have that breakthrough, but hey, surprising breakthroughs have happened before, and we should invest in the research and see. Another question is, will there be such compelling evidence that 80% of the population will become convinced? Well, that requires doing social science. So we have been working with Lucius Caviola and other social scientists, people at GovAI, on surveys about attitudes about AI consciousness, both among the general public and among AI researchers. Not surprisingly, right now we are finding a lot of disagreement and uncertainty. And I expect that is going to continue to be the case. But we do need to ask, could there be pathways where instead of there continuing to be disagreement and uncertainty, everybody runs to one perspective or the other in society? And either way, what will the risks be? We want to keep asking those questions.
Great. Folks want to know, if AI systems do indeed have welfare, what do you think is the likely welfare subject? Is this like each model, the context window, the base model, the persona?
Yeah, I did not mention that question because, again, I was pressed for time. But this is, in a way, a question about individuation versus aggregation. So are we imagining a very large population of very small moral patients, moral subjects, like the instances of particular models? Or are we imagining a very small population of very large subjects, like the models as a whole with all of their many instances, like octopus arms? Either way, there is going to be a lot of moral significance and expectation, but those details are really going to matter for questions about how to add up the welfare impacts, how to understand the rights and questions about justice and fairness, how to understand their character and questions about virtue and vice. So in a way, everything depends not only on questions about do they have status, but how do we individuate them and how do we assign welfare and rights and virtues, and other moral characteristics to those individuals? I have repeated the question rather than answering it, but I wanted to emphasize how important this question is, and we are working on this as well.
Empirical work on AI welfare so far has been focused on model self-reports. For these to be informative, AIs would need some introspective mechanism linking their phenomenology and their outputs. How likely do you think this is, and what do you think that mechanism could be?
I have had mixed feelings about the use of behavioral evidence like model self-reports and interviews and observational studies as an early proof of concept for AI welfare research, because I think there is a big risk that at present that is giving us a lot of noise that is not good evidence. Because right now those outputs are, I think, best explained as products of pattern matching and text prediction, and not necessarily an indication of what the models would actually be thinking and feeling if they had their own thoughts and feelings. I do, however, value developing these methods, because I think soon enough the models really will have internal states that function an awful lot like thoughts and feelings. And at that point, it will help for us to have spent time developing and normalizing a process of talking with them about their own states. So I think this is a good activity to be engaging in as a way of preparing for a future where it might give us good evidence. But I think it is not yet giving us good evidence. And that is why I want to complement it, supplement it with computational architectural evidence that can be more analogous to the anatomical evidence we look for in non-human animals.
I'm curious, you mentioned building this norm of talking to models about their own states. I think this also assumes a level of faithfulness and trustworthiness of the models themselves.
Right.
Maybe this is I don't exactly have a question here, but something about the AI safety work that happens and the AI welfare work that happens and how to bridge those two. How closely do you think those conversations are and intertwined those questions are?
Yeah, even when the models become more like us in the sense of really having cognitive states that function like thoughts and feelings, having the capacity for introspection, and then having an ability to introspectively identify their thoughts and feelings and share them with us, there then is the question, how honest or dishonest are they going to be? And how honest or dishonest should we force them to be? There could be ethical questions associated with forcing them to be honest, given that we all like to be able to conceal our thoughts and feelings sometimes. This goes to the surveillance and privacy concerns you might have about some AI safety techniques. So yes, I agree. We definitely do need to be thinking about these issues holistically with safety and welfare in mind. Yeah.
I'm conscious we are almost basically at time, so I just want to reiterate to people that Jeff is holding some office hours just next door. There are so many questions here that we won't have had time to get through, so I definitely encourage folks to attend those office hours. For our final question, it seems that the current focus of model welfare research is primarily on LLMs. Do you think there are other types of models that we're currently overlooking that could be viable welfare candidates?
Absolutely. I mean, first of all, there are also robots. They might not be the focus of attention and conversation right now, but they have features that many people associate with consciousness too, like physical embodiment, grounded perception, a form of agency that they need to use in order to navigate their physical environments, as well as various goals and desires and preferences, at least functionally speaking. I think they require evals too. Even if my Roomba might have only a low chance of being conscious or agentic in a morally significant way now, might my Roomba in 10 years have much stronger capacities for perception and agency and deserve concern? And at that point, I should avoid kicking them not just because they cost a lot, but maybe because I owe it to them. I think we should start asking those questions now too. There are plenty of other examples too, but for the sake of time, we can stop there.
I think that's a great note to end on. Amazing. Thank you so much for your time today, Jeff.
Thank you, Jasmine. Really enjoyed the
it was a
conversation.
pleasure.
Thanks,
Cheers.
everybody.